All right, good afternoon. I'm repping the cartel shirt. If you're interested in this, private message me, and if you did, I promise I'm getting them out. And I'm just going to send it to you, and if you send me payment, we'll do that on good faith. So you don't have to pay up front. We'll send it to you and then wait. Because I trust drug addicts. I trust drug addicts. All right, here we go. I want to talk a little bit about this whole overdose epidemic. And let's clarify, it's an overdose epidemic, not an opioid epidemic. Because the overdoses, they span other things. For example, here in Greenville, Xanax. Xanax are being thrown around at the high schools like Tic Tacs. You can overdose on Xanax. You can overdose on Xanax in combination with things. So obviously, it's an overdose epidemic. Why haven't we gotten anywhere? And we've gotten zero progress, guys. I don't care what anyone says. All this effort, all this time. You know what? Death, year after year after year, keeps clicking up. Can we have 1 year where it reduces or it slows or anything like that? That's even with all the Narcan. That's even with all the MAT. It just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing, and I'm going to explain to you why today. And here's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the AIDS epidemic as an example of an epidemic that they actually attacked in an appropriate way. So here we go. All right, AIDS starts in 1981. 1981. Over time, it climbs. It peaks at around 48,000, and it peaks in 1995. I got this information from the New York Times and the CDC. So that's 14 years. So they figured out in 14 years, starting from zero information, starting from scratch, they figured out. And what prompts that? Well, you know, like anything else, just like the recovery movement, they have advocacy. And you talk about breaking through the stigma. Those advocates had to break through the stigma of homosexuality. So they hit the streets. The advocates come out and they say, we want money for research. We want money for medicine. We want money for health care. Our medical world says, you know what? You're right. We should quit discriminating against you folks. And we're going to pump money into research, and we're going to pump money into health care. And we're going to have to invent a solution because no solution exists. Boom. Key thing, keep that in mind. No solution existed. They went to the lab. All right, what have we been doing with the overdose epidemic? Overdose epidemic starts in, let's just say for sake of argument, 2000. Some people would say the 1990s with our buddies at Purdue Pharma, but 2000 is a good place to start. So 2000 through 2016, 60,000 plus deaths. Now I want to camp out here for a minute. If you think everything's going okay and you think we're making progress, even though the death rate climbs year after year, I don't know what to tell you. If that's what you actually think, if you're out there and you're saying to yourself, everything's fine, Rich, I don't know what you're talking about, we're working really hard on this. It's not that we're not working really hard, we're working on the wrong target, and it's not working. So if you think it's working, don't bother with me. I'm not your guy. You want to go to some place where they're going to talk about some of the, they're just going to tell you the status quo stuff over and over again. I'm just going to drive you crazy because it is not working. We have a huge fundamental problem. Death rate, year over year. All right, why is it not working? Because you know what? We have advocates. We have advocates in the street overcoming the stigma. As a matter of fact, the stigma is even a little bit less than what they dealt with AIDS. So the advocates are in the street and they're screaming about it. And there are really good advocates like Faces and Voices of Recovery and Facing Addiction and Shatterproof. And there are really good advocates out there. Now understand there's a bunch of clowns out there that really aren't advocates. And I'm not talking about those folks. That's a whole nother issue. I'm talking about real, true, trained advocates. We are out there and we're trying to do something about it. And we don't work for treatment centers, and we're working hard to try to change things. And we're saying healthcare dollars, research, services. Here's the difference. The medical community comes in. Now this is actually the treatment community if you think about it, because that is the medical community. And rather than saying, we hear you, we're going to do something about it, we're going to invent something, we're going to go back to the lab, they say, we already have a solution. So what we really need to do is let's pump all that money and all that research and all that service into an existing solution. Here's the problem though, that solution doesn't work. That solution has already been in place and it has failed year over year over year. and it only touches about 10% of those in need. So I hope you can stick with me on this. All our work as advocates is going to be for nothing unless somebody goes back to the lab again like they did for AIDS. Somebody needs to go to the lab and invent a new medicine. And here's what's going to happen. I fear, even though there are really good folks out there in treatment, and maybe some innovative folks, that you're going to have to keep treatment out of this conversation. And this is like a healthcare, strictly a healthcare / business / recovery management process. Because you can't have folks in the room that are so tied into that old thinking that you got to do, certain things for recovery, and we got to wait for people to hit bottom, and things got to get worse before they got to be willing, and they got to come. It's almost like you got to come begging for services. We got to move away from that and all those preconceived ideas in order to invent a new solution. And then if you did that, what you would see is we would eventually peak out with this issue. It would stabilize because we would invent a new way of going about it. It only took 14 years for them to solve the AIDS crisis, for it to peak and then start to decline. That's when you know an epidemic is done. We've been at it for 16 years, 17 years already with this, probably longer, probably 20 years, and we've gotten nowhere. So please, if you have anything to do with policy, new things, innovative things. All right. Later. Have a wonderful day.